I'm Nick Sherrard from Market Gravity. I'm actually not going to be talking about Studio B quite as much. It's more about, for me, in terms of where are the opportunities just now for both concept stores and innovation labs, and almost kind of what is it that Studio B should be the start of, really, I think. So just very briefly, so Market Gravity is an innovation agency, innovation and proposition design, depending which sector, as which language it is that you're most happy with. But the key thing for us is we help companies in different sectors find where their next big opportunity is going to be, and then find how to design a product or a service that responds to that, and then importantly try and get it out into the world and actually working. So in terms of interaction with B, is back from designing the first service, the digital service 2 years ago, that then sort of turned into the physical space, among many other things. So just first of all, just to head straight into the elephant in the room. So if you look through the list of people that are speaking today, I am aware that I am the only management consultant in the line. And just to give you a little bit of warning, this is the last kind of management consultancy slide. There's no other process kind of slides that turn up in this particular deck in particular. And that is partly because normally what management consultants do at this type of event is we talk about disruption and things that are going on. And what we mean is it's all going to be disruption for you guys, and we stay doing the same thing. Whereas the reality at the moment is that everything is very much up in the air. The way that we do innovation in the round is really changing, partly because there are new things possible. It's really interesting today in terms of having the real data from the way that we interact with the space is coming up on the board at the back. There's the way that we do insight, there's very new things that are now possible. Also because, frankly, having observed what's really happening in practice, lots of the orthodoxies about the way that innovation is supposed to happen are no longer, in particular, true. Just to sort of put up here in terms of, again, just to do all the kind of getting all of the dirty washing out in public, management consultancy type stuff. We love process. There's lots of different processes. If you go online and search innovation, retail innovation in the round, you will get faced with a huge amount of process diagrams, because that apparently is the answer. But the reality on the ground that many of you will realize, one of the key dynamics just now, is really that being good is no longer the right thing, if you like. If you're just average, it's very easy for you to fade into the background. Being average, if you like, no longer really works commercially. Oops. Here. Not being able to work the board also doesn't work commercially, apparently. Good. Good, okay, there we go. So this is the key point here is that essentially doing the right things is all well and good. Pretty much every major brand in the world now has some kind of innovation function, whether they call it a team or whether they call it a part of some other team that kind of does innovation, and most of them have gone through the different process documents. Most of us are doing some type of customer research. And the really important thing, if we're talking about innovation labs, if we're talking about concept stores, the really key question is, what are you doing that your competitors are no longer doing or aren't doing right? What is it that you are doing that means that you are going to outthink your competition? And it can't just be doing everything more, which tends to be people's first reaction around that. I'm going to do more insight than people have done before, or I'm going to do everything bigger and better. And there's a key revelation that I think has come through, which I think lots of different innovation teams are starting to face into. And it's partly the result of now we have more data, we can see more things in practice. We can see more things about the way what customers do. We can see more things in terms of the way that we operate ourselves as businesses. It's also because actually a lot of the techniques that people have been talking about for the last 10 years as things that are new are actually quite mature, so we can see how they work in practice, in particular around innovation labs and concept stores. And the key revelation really is that most people lie. Now that works in two ways. So in terms of most of the ways we do traditional customer research is we have lots of conversations with people essentially, sometimes through the form of surveys, sometimes through the form of focus groups. But the reality is, which we kind of know ourselves secretly, is that we are really bad witnesses to our own behavior. So I can take you into a focus group, you can go and run it in that room through there, and we'll ask people about how they feel about their security online. And everyone will say it's very important. And I would say it was very important myself if I was in that particular group, because it is very important. And I know that it's very important. If you ask me the question of how many passwords do I have, I would say 2. Because I don't remember any more than that, and frankly, I'm really lazy. So if I were to design a service about my previous response, which is I think it's really important, I would design something entirely wrong. And indeed, most online security programs are based around that particular mistake. And the second lie is one that we are all every single person in this room, I suspect, a lie that we all tell, which is the lie about how innovation actually happens in big companies. Because if you ask people how innovation happens in big companies, everyone always said that we do a kind of insight phase at the start, and through that we gradually found some different opportunities, and then what we did was we went through into a design stage, and it's all very neat and tidy. The reality is people have hunches that they need to explore and they need to test in different ways. There's all kinds of things around how you build an innovation process that is around the way things actually work, that actually... Yep, go for it.
I'll do it later.
Do it now.
We genuinely do start from insight.
We do start from insight, but I think we work in a slightly different way. I'll get on to that. That's okay. Good. I thought you'd say that, so I was happy with you taking the question early. That's good. And so in terms of where we are just now, we are trying to learn about what is now possible in innovation, new ways to do innovation through observation. And there's some really exciting things happening in the wider world that speak into the way that we design concept stores. That again. Good. And the way we design innovation labs. This key thing in terms of the shift in culture. So the traditional thing around innovation is to try and find a way to be the know-it-all. The way you run the concept stories, you take your kind of concept for how you're going to, what you think the future will be, and you'll make that as real as possible and as important looking as possible. The shift is to try and be desperate for learning all the time and accepting that the way technology is moving so fast, and also in terms of people's interaction with technology is changing so fast, then actually we need to find ways to learn much faster and explore, right, and be a genuine, and that's the phrase from Microsoft rather than ours, shifting from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. The second, which speaks into this piece around insight, which is the phrase that came from Amazon. So the traditional thing in all areas of innovation is we talk about essentially different crafts, and it could be insight, it can be design, it can be all different aspects that sort of make up that kind of chain of the things we call innovation, and we try and build the best centers of excellence that we can possibly build. The great phrase that Amazon have is moving from the kind of the 1,000 hours that turns you into a craftsman into the 1,000 experiments that turns us into the pioneers. So how can we build insight? So insight is important all the way through. It's not even just an insight phase at the start anymore, but how can we find ways to learn by doing and learn by making? So in terms of the team, what might be saying, in terms of I'm sure there are things that we haven't got right at the moment in terms of the way we're tracking the data, but we're much better to make it real, test it, see how people interact with it tonight, break it in a few different ways, come back tomorrow and take it in a different direction. And fundamentally, just to have a little bit of academia in the piece as well, because that also gives it a bit of heft. But there's really important work that's going on just now at the MIT Media Lab around the switch from the world of research and development, which all of the kind of previous ideas of innovation have essentially been. It's kind of based on the idea of R&D into experiment at scale. So how can we find ways to test things quickly, understand how the thing operates, and then take that to scale. So the final thing I'd then say really is just in terms of from all of that, what we did was we tried to draw together the real experience of people who are actually launching real innovation, if you like, having real impact in the world, being disruptive, much like B has been over the last 2 years. And what we looked for was what are the key things that we can learn from that? What are the key plays that they all have that start to mark us out? So if we're going to go forward and be a real innovator and really cause disruption in the market, what are the things that we should be basing our thinking around? And these play directly into the way that we run concept stores and innovation labs in the future. The first of those is a phrase that we've used a lot within Clydesdale over the last little while. Love the problem, not the solution. But this speaks directly into the big problem with lots of different concept stores. And that is that they become safe spaces that you've created for some of the assumptions you have internally within the business. Whereas actually one of the things that is really exciting about Studio B is the openness, is the fact that customers can come in and see what's going on. Other brands can come in and see what's going on. And that is directly in terms of if you really accept that the future is going to be about fast experimentation, then you want to get that feedback early. You want to really be responding all the time as you go through. The second thing that people miss a lot is the mission mindset. So it's really easy if you create, whether it's a concept store or an innovation lab, for everyone to start trying to essentially solve the whole industry all the time. What we need to do is pick up time-boxed missions. So we're going to focus on one particular thing for a fixed amount of time. It's quite hard to discipline yourself around that, but that starts to enable you to be much more genuinely experimental because you're taking a team and you're focusing them at one particular issue, which allows us to really explore it fully. The last three bring up different aspects of this as we go through. So first of all, profit over pride. The traditional idea of the concept store in particular was, if you like, a pure brand play. It was purely about taking some of the thinking in the business, making it real and making some noise around it. Whereas actually we now have the opportunity, if you look at the amount of data we can get, if you look at how experimental we can be, to actually start to prove what the future of that business is. Not even just a particular type of experience, we can start to really prove the whole business. Killer features kill is interesting as well in terms of a key thing in terms of the wider shift in innovation is it used to all be about adding more things in. So you take the thing you did before, you add more technology or whatever the new particular feature is. The key thing just now is to explore what are the things that we could take out that would start to allow us to launch quite a different type of proposition in the future. And the final one is play produces. One of the great things with Studio B is partly in terms of the way this draws in customers, it draws in partners for the bank in different ways, but also staff from across the bank kind of want to be a part of this place and want to be here. And that kind of playful element becomes a really key thing if you want to make innovation really work. So just two final slides from me, one of which just to point out that even though, there you go, good, almost got there, the last one, the last two. So we are kind of eating our own dog food in this. So in terms of, I'm very happy to talk after this in terms of, we're starting to set up trial spaces. We've got one coming up that's going to be in a pub to start to run some live experiments to understand how people interact with that space in different ways, depending on how we kind of intervene within it. And also retail spaces and even potentially a theme park in the next few weeks. And this finally, I think in terms of after the talks are over, it's really good, I think, to start to look around Studio B again, kind of in that light. So there's lots of really exciting ideas in the lab itself, but also I think there's directly things that are some really exciting conversations being sparked by what David and the team here have done in terms of this is really a leading example of a lab that is based on experimentation. And I think that's one of the key important things that comes from Studio B. It's an incredible customer experience, but also I think this is a little slice of what the future of innovation could be.